question is that the bill be now read a second time. I've just had a message chunted to me from a government whip that the Secretary of State is content to wait for a period, and the honourable gentleman, the member for Cleethorpes, is the beneficiary. Mr. Martin Vickers.
Right. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I was only just beginning to write my speech, but I'll muddle along. Needless to say, Mr. Speaker, as a almost lifelong Brexit supporter, I'm speaking against the proposal. I recognise that across the House there are members who quite genuinely did not want to leave the EU. They believe that the best interests of our country lies as a member of that union, and that's a perfectly honourable position. But what I find objectionable is those who are quite deliberately seeking to frustrate the will of the British people, so clearly demonstrated in June 2016. And in my particular constituency, there was a 70% vote to leave. I'm pleased about that because, of course, I was one of them, and I have campaigned long and hard to achieve this. In fact, I know I don't look old enough, but I did actually vote in the 1975 referendum, and of course I voted to leave on that occasion, and that was I'll happily give way to my neighbour.
I thank you for giving way. Is it not the case, though, that many of our constituents who, as he says, voted by a margin of 70% to leave the European Union, now think that what's happening, and this is the problem with bills like this, is that there is a stitch-up taking place to try to deny the result of the referendum? And it's all perfectly fine, people talking about people coming together, but when legislation is put forward to deny a way of leaving the EU by people who are on the other side of the campaign, our constituents only feel more that this place is out of touch with them and that this is all one massive stitch-up.
Absolutely. My honourable friend and neighbour is absolutely right in his analysis of the situation. And moving on, if those who, for example, are arguing for a second referendum, the so-called people's vote, as if it wasn't people who voted on the last occasion, I'll give way one more time to my honourable friend.
Your neighbour, but it's very. Thank you very much for actually letting me intervene. I would actually very much agree with him that we've had a people's vote, and that happened in 2016. I actually voted and campaigned Remain, but I believe we must respect that vote and we must get on and leave the European Union. And lots of people on the other side are just thwarting it, even though in their manifesto they actually were campaigning to leave the European Union as well.
Thank you. I thank my honourable friend for that, and although he's not my neighbour, he is, of course, welcome to visit Cleethorpes at any time, and he will be made most welcome. I was moving on to talk about a second referendum and the uncertainty and division that will actually continue. Are those members who think it will resolve the issue seriously suggesting that if we were to have a rerun and a lower turnout, that perhaps a scenario could unfold where 16.4 million people voted to remain, and because it was a lower turnout, they actually won? Now, do you think that would satisfy the 17.4 million who in 2016 voted to leave? Of course not. It would continue. It would continue the division and uncertainty, and we would be battling on for another 20, 30 years about our future in Europe. I think what you've got to remember is that to a great extent, it was an emotional vote by people. We had Project Fair that told them they were going to be worse off, that taxes were going to rise within days, hours even, of a decision. In actual fact, they said, well, that's fine, let's look at that. But we want to leave, not because of some potential downturn in our economy, but because it's a cultural issue. Our history, our structure of government in Parliament, our judicial processes are different, and we were having to make more and more changes to our established processes. Well, I'll give way first to the honourable lady.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm very grateful for my honourable friend giving way. The vote itself was on our membership of the EU. It was not about our future relationship. All those emotional matters that my honourable friend raises may well have been sold to them during the campaign, but the vote itself was about our membership and therefore cannot be prayed in aid in terms of how it shapes our future relationship.
I strongly disagree with my honourable friend. They voted to leave the structure of the economic union, and they wanted to slam the door closed. They wanted a clean break with it. They weren't thinking about our future relationship. They said we've had enough with the existing relationships. I give way to my honourable friend.
My honourable friend is making an excellent speech. I mean, what he also, I'm sure, will agree with is that, in addition to the emotion, actually they were proved right, because despite all the predictions of doom and gloom in 2016, the economic reality since is that we've had a strong period of economic growth, and those investment decisions have been made in the full knowledge that we could be leaving on no-deal WTO terms.
That's right. I entirely agree with my honourable friend. So we move on. They made that decision to leave, and they expected us to be leaving, and they certainly expected us to be leaving a lot quicker than 3 years. Now, it is suggested that if we go back and rerun the referendum and so on, it will all people will change their mind because of the economic arguments and so on. The reality, I think, is very different, and I think we should recognise that, as I recall the Attorney General saying in one of his outings in the House on this issue, this is now come down to a political decision, and the political decision should follow the result of the referendum. And I think there will be an enormous backlash against not just the party in power, but the political classes. If as the people see, they see the door in front of us marked exit, and we are seen not to step through it. And I would urge the House to vote against this and to continue the battle. And if we end up with no deal, then so be it.